Hey, we're here on the podcast with Mr. Michael Katz, that's K-A-T-Z, and Michael helped scale a company to an 11-figure exit. He's now the founder of Flowsend.ai, which transforms how creators and businesses maximize their content's impact through AI. And if you're one of those people that likes to listen to a podcast and follow along, I think you're going to be really like I was by going to flowsend.ai, where they just give you a box right up there, right up front. They say, give us a video, give us an audio. And so just before this podcast started, I started recording and we're at about like 90% uploaded. So we're going to be in real time seeing how Flowsend transforms a video or audio into high quality repurposable content in minutes. But enough from me. Let's get to the man, the myth, the legend, the guest of the hour, Mr. Michael Katz. How the heck are you today, Mr. Michael?
I'm doing great. It's Friday. I'm loving it right now. I don't know when you'll be listening to this, but I'm feeling good today.
Right. Well, for us, it's Friday in real time, and I'm right there with you. It's like Friday, I do have a few appointments on the schedule, such as this, but usually Friday is like the relaxing creative time. I heard a bunch of years ago about how the big startups did that, right? Like Google, especially, they say, hey, our employees, Monday through Thursday, you do the nitty gritty, putting out the fires, getting the details, but Friday is new ideas, is creativity time. So speaking of that, tell me about some Friday thoughts. What is your passion, your focus, big picture? What have you accomplished? What are you heading towards?
Yeah, there's never a shortage of work to do, obviously. And, the great thing about actually being in a field that serves, I guess I've spent my career mostly in the enterprise, talking to enterprise folks. Now, enterprise folks are very interesting in their own right, and everyone has lives and careers and passions and dreams. But, what's been really interesting about building Flowsend is the ability to serve both enterprises and individuals and creators. And so a lot of times I find myself in these very random conversations where I talk to someone who's involved in something very, very niche and something that I didn't really know someone was that into and nerding out about. And I actually had a conversation in the area this morning around where I live in New Jersey with someone who's creating big YouTube channels and content around board games. And that is certainly not something I think a lot about in my day-to-day life, but it's an amazing opportunity to get to hear and serve the people who are kind of really serving the passion economy, the creator economy in general. And so I love that.
And it's a good just lesson to tap into, right? That whatever you create, especially if it's software, it's serving and helping people. And you're trying to debug or trying to get your team to do things or break through the problems. But on the other side of that are people who are using your solution in order to solve some problems, save some time, get some eyeballs on their own business, on their own passion. And that's good to get dialed in your niche and to figure out your marketing, but also as a self-motivator to keep you going, to get through all the headaches and the frustrations. So that's a good lesson right off the bat. And so tell us about Flowsend. Like, what does it does? What does it do? I'm looks like my video, it's uploaded, but it's circling around, it's processing. So what is the output? What does this tool create?
Yeah, look, we really want to help everyone from creators to marketers to content producers publish faster and get more out of every single piece of content. And I think really what kind of stood out to me about what was going on in the economy in general, on the internet, is, on one end you have this kind of like negative takeover of AI, right? That you could argue, which is, okay, there's so much content out there. How do I sift through the noise? Everyone's publishing now, everyone's posting. The internet game is getting harder than ever with everyone playing it. On the other hand, there's still this amazing opportunity where people want to hear from people. People want to hear unique insights. They're still craving, things to learn. There's more access to content than ever. That's a beautiful thing. So how do you kind of match those two people on each side of that market? And I think everyone from the biggest business in the world to an individual creator sitting in their basement wants to solve that problem for themselves. They want to put out content they like. And what we got really passionate about was recorded content. What really is going to distinguish people is the ability to kind of talk something out, this kind of like long form recorded content, short form recorded content. That's where the most originality, in my opinion, still lies. It's totally differentiated, just like your podcast. It's something that no one else can really replicate. I mean, there's these Google tools now, whatever, we'll see what happens, but I still am really, really bullish on it. The problem is it's hard to produce, it's hard to get out there, and it's hard to really maximize that content and turn it into assets that are going to grow your business or grow your channel, right? Whatever that might be, grow your thought leadership, whether you're an individual or a business. And so that's what we really want to help people do. We want to help people repurpose that content. We want to help people publish faster with really high quality content. But not only that, really focusing on the brand voice. How do we have something that sounds like you? It shouldn't sound generic. Everything should sound just like you. That's the only way you're going to stand out. So that's really what we do. And I'm happy to go further into it, but we want to help people grow.
And let's get some people growing. And so you mentioned a few like really helpful insights and things that are maybe talked about every now and then, or that I've heard but that I forgot or remember. And it's like I'm always trying to tap into the idea of that you can't get basic enough, right? You can't get beginner enough. A couple of months ago, I mentioned to my marriage counselor, ChatGPT, and she's like, "Oh, like what is that?" And she wrote it down. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, a lot of people don't even know that ChatGPT exists, and you can just give it any question, it outputs stuff. You paste in your podcast transcript, gives you the best quotes, gives you SEO titles, can make a LinkedIn post, like, and it's almost magical. But then there's like so many moving parts, right? And it's like, and if you forgive me for a second to mention some competitors, because I use like 5 different tools, right? I
Sure.
use like the Otter and the Descript and the Opus, and then I go and I like put it into Canva, and I find myself like I'm trying to hang on to the complexity, but also do what you mentioned there of like putting out the content consistently, making sure the brand voice sounds like me, and like attracting people, but also having fun, right? You're on a podcast here, and we'll have all these little nuggets that will just come out organically. And if you try to force it, you try to say, "Hey, how do I make a viral moment?" Then either like you might waste 13 hours a day trying to find the 5-minute clip, or you might just be just kind of beating your head against the wall. So it makes a lot of sense to do the podcast, the long-term form recorded content, and then also kind of repurpose it, because some people like the TikToks. And I also find myself every now and then being pulled into like a 3-hour Joe Rogan type of thing just every now and then. And so it makes a lot of sense to show up, be authentic, share some cool stuff, and then use the tool appropriately. And so that way you can get distributed and get this maximum kind of reach. And so, man, help us make sense of that. Like it sounds like a big promise, but I'm even overwhelmed just mentioning it. So help us get to there.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that is going to kind of distinguish these different tools, there's obviously this like specialization aspect of it. You mentioned you're kind of bouncing between tools. And I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. And I'll tell you why, is that quality is going to become more and more important as we start scaling everything. You need to stand out. Just being generic will not be enough anymore. It's really that simple. Everyone is kind of catching on at this point. And so for me, I'd started a podcast originally. I don't come from the space at all. And now we're focused on things beyond podcasts as well. But I started it to support another business I was building. And I was like, I need to make this thing into a content engine, as anybody should be doing. Companies have so much content locked up in their backlog, and their leaders are saying, you need to do more, you need to publishing more, we don't have resources. Well, you do. You've already published a bunch of it, you've already created stuff. You need to be using that and getting the most out of that, originality. And so I was trying to do that. What I found in tools like ChatGPT, you mentioned Descript, love them. I use them for my editing. But even them is this content came out really generic, this copy, whether it was, to your point, these titles and show notes, things like that, to my SEO keywords on my blogs and my social copy. I don't want something generic. I have a voice. I actually love writing. I love copywriting. I just don't have time, right? Like most people, I don't have time to think about something for every platform and get it all out. It's like a term paper every time I put something out. And so what I needed to do is get from somewhere where that kind of automates 40% of that work to like 95%. That was really important to me. That like, number one, the brand voice part, and number two, like the workflows. Does it know everything I want to put in this episode? I want to have my kind of like template of here's everything I'm going to publish, and I want to put that out. And so a good example is after we release this podcast, I'm going to put this podcast into Flowsend with a guest appearance template that I have of here's everything I want to put out every time I appear as a guest, to repurpose what I do into a post that mentions the podcast, into a post that doesn't mention the podcast, that just takes some of the things that I said that are kind of my unique perspective and repurpose that. And so you mentioned a lot of really great tools. But what we want to be is probably not for 90% of people. We're not going to be for 90% of people. People who just want any old thing, use any old thing. I don't care. What we're going to do the work for on the back end is to help make this much higher quality that it's going to be anywhere else, number one. And then number two, to embed those preferences you have around how you want things to sound, around how you want things to come out, and kind of generate those all at once.
Well, that sounds like a tall order, and it's great how you've kind of differentiated about this, right? Because there's that, I mean, especially with AI, like there's like the other day I went to some webpage that listed all the AI tools. There's 16,000, not even an exaggeration. And like I believe it, right? Every time you open up LinkedIn, it's like, oh, here's 6 new of them. That's just the ones that I see. And so there's definitely and we all have our preferences, right? And so there's like these tools that like I'm using, and there's like, okay, well, are you trying to wrestle me away from using them? And you're saying like, well, hey, it like this does something even more different, and it's not for everyone. And so it's like the problem that it seems like you're solving, like you mentioned, getting from the 40% to the 95%. That's like ever since ChatGPT started. It's like, okay, how do I get the AI to not be generic, to not say how we're delving into this or it's a testament to that? How do I speak like a human, and specifically like me? And like every couple of weeks, I find myself in play mode, and I'm like, okay, let me take another like a personality quiz, right? Let me give it my Colby score, my Myers-Briggs. Let me give it some of my writing and like extract all of the adjectives and say write like that. And it kind of, I'm not even sure if it's really doing the job. I don't even know how to look at writing and say, oh, well, like that's as if I had amnesia and I wrote that. And so in this quest to make the AI do what we would have done, right, as far as like the editing and the clips, or to put out the text the way that we would have written it, what should we know just about this, like the strategy of doing it, and how does Flowsend kind of make their output what we would have written?
Yeah. I always compare using AI to managing employees. I can give someone a task and say, here's what I need from you, very simply. And then they can give it to me back. And I gave them pretty broad instructions. And then I get pissed at them suddenly for not doing it exactly the way I wanted it. Well, I didn't really give them the tools to do it the exact way I wanted. I didn't give them examples of what good looks like for me. I didn't tell them, hey, here's what it is. It takes a little time to iterate. And so how do you kind of reduce that amount of time and also become a better manager, communicate better, giving specific instructions? And there are ways and kind of arcane techniques to do that really well. We want to abstract away that complexity from users. We don't want you to have to think about that very much. We want to think about that for you and embed that in the platform, and then still give you the ability to embed kind of some of your kind of expertise and specialty and some of your writing for every output. So what do titles look, let's say you're a podcast, or what do titles look like for you? What do show notes look like for you? What do your social posts look like? We know that now. We've already trained on that. We know what you look like. We know what you want every time. And you can kind of continue to iterate that over time, but you can also set it and forget it. And so that's for anything. That's for, you're running an event, you're doing a webinar, you have any kind of content that you're putting out, even a product demo. How do you generate that valuable copy for yourself? And so it's really about giving it examples of what good looks like for you. And maybe you don't have examples. So maybe it's about asking it to generate something generic and feeding the thing that you ended up with back to it to store in there. And so we store all those for our clients, basically for each output of saying, hey, here's what it is for you. We let them put higher level context on what they want to rank for from an SEO perspective, how they want to grow, who their audiences are for different things that they're putting out there, their target customers, whatever that might be. How do we allow them to put like guidelines in, consistent instructions that they want every time, while still giving them the ability to chat with each one independently to really speed up their workflow? And so, I don't know. I compare ChatGPT kind of like, sometimes it's like using a microwave to cook a gourmet meal, right? It gets the job done, but it's like, there's just something not that good about it. You're like, I could tell this is from a microwave, right? And we kind of want to reduce that. And again, some people don't care. We care a lot. So we're for people that care, maybe, is the way to put it.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. And when using ChatGPT, I think you're right on a lot of these points. Like I find myself, despite all the tools that are out there, right? Despite you can make your custom GPT, or you can make your assistant with all the database, I find myself still like growing these messy text files with all these templates. And like you mentioned earlier, like you're like, well, I want to repurpose this content. mentioning the podcast, but also something more generic. And I'm like, well, I want to generate like a promotional email, like one from the host, one from the guest. I find all these like slightly different things, and I find myself just kind of being like 88 or 89% happy with what ChatGPT comes out. Not even not, it's like just below 90%, right? It's like I'm kind of happy with what it comes out with, and then I find myself being like, hey, can you help me revise this prompt? And it's kind of like just, it's always a mess, right? And
It's a
so,
mess.
and maybe like there might be some mess there, but like what we're hoping that there can be some cleaning up the mess and using a tool like Flowsend. And so, how do people get to use Flowsend without going down a whole other path of complexity, right? Because like, juggling the text files, it's kind of like using a spreadsheet versus CRM, right? You're like, well, it's a mess, but it's my mess. And I'm kind of concerned in advance about my brain having to like learn all these other new tools, all these other new menus. And so how do you counteract that? How do you kind of do the striving for perfectionism for people, but also keeping it simple enough where like the barrier of entry is low, and also keep it fun enough that way like they want to use your tool, they enjoy it? How do you kind of balance all those weird factors?
Yeah, I think you make a great point, which is like sometimes learning another tool is just irritating. Where you're like, I don't want to do that. I know it could be valuable, but I don't want to do that. And I've actually never sold a tool in my life that has a free trial. And finally we do, which is for better or for worse, because sometimes that can be its own little danger. But it's a beautiful thing because someone can discover the magic themselves. And the key is like getting them to discover it. And so we're, trying to keep the interface as simple as possible at all times while still adding in things in the background. Sometimes I'm concerned that people we're talking to won't understand the complexity because it looks too simple. And I'm like, well, I guess that's a good problem to have, but it's kind of like the kayak. You want to make the search results seem like they're going for longer. So people think that it's harder than it is. But yeah, it's about like keeping it very simple, going against our worst inclinations of adding more clutter. And then let's say I'm on a call with somebody, an onboarding call. I sometimes want to get them thinking in real time, hey, what's something you wish you could create from this? And showing them just how easy it is. Yeah, there's levels to this, but we want to put that in the background for them. And so I think that's part of it, is showing them how simple it is, creating a very, it's managing that complexity versus simplicity in every given moment. So for instance, we let people create new outputs in their like template. Let's say that I'm like, I want to create a LinkedIn post for my executive based on this transcript, or I want to create one for my guest. You're like, I want to create one for you. I want to kind of ask it for that as a separate thing, and that's going to flow into my template now. And so suddenly I have that as something that's going to generate every time. I generated our case studies using Flowsend. I found some case studies I liked online from a few companies. I see these are kind of simple and straightforward in the way I like them. I generated some specific kind of like outputs with examples in a template in Flowsend, and I just fed in customer calls into that template. And so the use cases are really endless in that sense of like, if I have enough creativity, I can do anything I want, but we also want to make things very simple and templated for those who don't want to have to mess around and think about like the mess, to your point. How do you be for both audiences at once?
And I mean, so how do you just say like, well, it's the simple interface, and then if you want to pop out or click on or expand some parts, you can. Like, how do you serve both those audiences?
It's really hard. It's really, really hard. And I think, who knows, maybe long term we'll have to make a decision to just kind of like say, hey, let's say the prosumers, hey, you know what? We're not really recruiting them anymore. We're not marketing to them anymore. You're grandfathered into your pricing right now, but we're only focusing on enterprise. Enterprises tend to get us really well and understand what we're doing probably faster. So who knows? But I'd say like right now, it's about creating really simple templates that allow people to get started and just use something out of the box. And then creating a lot of customizability of being able to add new things, use different settings features, kind of like power user features. I would describe them as those ones. And then I'll give you an example. As we talked about, podcasters are one of our main audiences. It was the first reason we created it. I want to emulate my titling and show note formats. We automatically pull those in from your RSS feed if you tell us what your podcast is. And so that's a feature we added, I don't know, a month or two ago, because we said, look, we want that first login to be delightful. We want that first time for the person to say, oh, they get me. They understand my style. And we used to make people put that in themselves, but then we're like, well, we can actually pull a few of these things for them. And so that's kind of how we're trying to think about it, is how do we even embed some of those magic moments without someone even basically having to lift a finger? And we have a lot of room to grow on that front, but yeah.
That's powerful, and you put a label on something that I mentioned it a few of my different podcasts. This idea of the when when I was a kid, I used Word Perfect, right? And when I started using Word, I opened it and there's like a blank document opens right on there. I'm like, what? I opened this program. I don't have to go file new. There's just like a blank one there. And I remember being so blown away at something so simple, kind of like how you go to Flowsend. There's like the upload form right there. And I uploaded the file, and then it said like, hey, here's some cool quotes from this podcast you uploaded. And then it said, here, go and create an account. I'm like, oh, well, I'm on a podcast right now with Michael. I can't fill this in, but I'm like, okay, cool. Like they thought this through. Like there's the little micro commitments, and there's the making me excited. Like, I cleared my cookies yesterday and then went to LinkedIn, log back in. And then like I went to the front page and it's like already logging with Google, like without me having to click. So there's like these cool magic moments of just like bringing me along. I didn't even have to like click the one button. And so it's sort of like whatever tiny little attention span I had just when I first go to the webpage, it's not used up yet, right? Because you kind of skip me ahead a step or two. And so these are some like really powerful, cool ideas to think about. I wish we had like a whole hour to unpack them, but we're here on a podcast just to give us a taste. And so in the last couple of questions, last couple of minutes here, you mentioned this idea here of the feeding in all of the stuff, right? The whole mountain of gasoline or water or something, and then shaping it in a certain way, right? You said you found case studies from other companies, you kind of templatize them, you fed in your customer calls. That's really cool. That's really powerful. And so along those lines, like what are we missing out on content wise, podcast wise? What's something that we should be like really looking into? And a lot of us just aren't, because we aren't thinking the way you are as far as like these kind of 4-step strategy. Like what's something like really hot, powerful that content creators, podcasters should be perhaps using Flowsend to do?
Yeah, I think everyone is missing out right now on the fact that you need to meet your audience where they are. And that's easier said than done because you only have so much time in a day. And I think that applies to from companies on the high end and to creators on kind of the quote unquote low end. You have so much stuff that you want to be able to get through, but audiences don't always have time to consume your content consistently. I'll give you a great example. Your podcast, it's very consistent. It comes out all the time. I had my first kid last year. That totally changed the way I thought about my content consumption. I suddenly realized I might not have time today or this week to listen to this thing that I thought I could consistently listen to or read, whatever it might be. And I said, you know what? I just can't do that anymore. Sometimes I'm really curious about what's going on here, but I just don't have the bandwidth or energy right now to consume this as a podcast or as a video because I'm around him and I'm trying to be focused. And maybe I have time to read it as a 3-point summary at the end of the night. And so we have to understand just because they're not consuming everything that we've worked hard on doesn't mean they don't want what we have. It doesn't mean they don't expect that consistency in their lives or the value that we're providing to them. Maybe they might love your podcast, Robert, but they don't always have time. They want to read key points in a newsletter during their morning coffee. They want to scan through a Twitter thread during a lunch break. So I think the smartest people are realizing they need to meet their audience where they are, and they need to keep putting those kind of pennies in the piggy bank around discoverability. How are they creating kind of descriptions or posts or captions that matter and grab attention? How are they still investing in SEO? People are talking about that as like some kind of a thing in the past. Still matters today of like, how do I get to the top of where people actually are so that people can find what I'm doing? And that does mean you need to show up across a lot of different places. Unfortunately, that old mantra is still going to apply. So I think that's what people are missing. And I think people are missing something that I do a lot, which is I record myself talking sometimes just when I'm on a walk, when I'm on the road, whatever it might be, that I have a random thought. And that suddenly is now original content that I can go produce and make into something valuable for folks who care about me.
And that right there, that's something that I need to do more of. The kind of record the raw audio and then have the AI kind of refine it into something. And then if you want to go back and edit it, but you get to the destination faster. And like I've been kind of stuck the last couple of days writing a particular email. Like you mentioned copywriting earlier, right? I'm kind of got a little bit of the writer's block. And maybe it's not even just like a creativity block, just don't have the time, right? Got too many things to be doing. So that's a good reminder of like use the AI, morph it into what you need to get done. And so it seems like you're mentioning that there's like a new set of rules, right? Especially with the expected to be always on all these different platforms. Like if you walked into a shop as a customer, you kind of expected to be seen like instantly right away. Whether you took 3 months to walk in, you still want to be seen in seconds. And so that's a good insight that just because people aren't maybe like say one particular customer, right? They're not interacting with your content right now. It doesn't mean that they don't like you or want to see you or hear from you or learn from you. They just don't have the time right now. But when they do have the time, when they are ready, heck, you better be out there. You better be consistent. You better be ready. And
you also don't know. I was talking to an agency owner the other day, and they have this big agency in manufacturing space. They had a client come to them recently, a now client, and say, hey, I've been consuming your content for over 2 years. Podcasts, LinkedIn posts, tweets. We're finally ready to explore the services you guys have. Over 2 years, they had no idea who this person was. If they had expected immediate ROI from that, they would have been screwed. But because they stuck consistent on that front and kind of showed up consistently across platforms, it took 2 years. But you got to think how many other people are there, how many other people are lurking. We're all lurkers right now.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I find myself in that all the time. And so it's like, I know what I think. Oh, this thing's hot right now. Whoa, this person's really doing good stuff. And I sometimes can't take that lesson to heart. So it's interesting.
It is just the lag time, the volume, the momentum, and so it's not a reason to give up or to kind of be inconsistent. Like get that pipeline going. And so in these last few minutes of our conversation, as people are checking out, thinking about heading to flowsend.ai, what's the missing hidden question in our conversation? What do you wish that I would ask you that I just don't know to ask you?
If I'm being honest, I wish you'd ask me what music I've been listening to recently. Whatever, I think that tools for me, to be honest with you, should provide us with more time to do the things that we love and enjoy or grow our businesses. Now, unfortunately, I don't have enough time to do that because I'm trying to grow a tool that helps other people do that. All right, that's my own time that I'm committing to wasting for everybody else. But yeah, I think like we should be passionate about the like art, the creative stuff that we put out there, whether you're a business doing it as your job or, whether you're someone independent who can actually do it themselves. And you should be able to grow. You should be able to do the things that allow you to create regularly. I think, Robert, you're someone who a lot of people should look to for advice. And I think after we get off this, I'd love for your advice because to be able to create consistent content every day is something most people think is actually impossible. And so what are those foundational and guiding principles that you have to ensure that you're not being too perfectionist about everything, that you have the tools that make it really easy for you? And we want to provide that for people like you that say, I really care about what I put out there. So I want it to be good, but I want this to be easy.
That's a deep thought. Just this idea of directing your perfectionism, right? Is my perfectionism like, well, I've got to make this one piece of content or podcast episode perfect and I'll let it eat up my whole week? Or is my perfectionism, I want to get all the slots lined up and so I'll kind of I'll stop my perfectionism on this one hyper focused task and I'll kind of distribute it or apply it more better. It's hard to think about, right? It hurts your brain, just like it kind of hurts your brain about all the philosophizing about the coming decades with AI. Like, will it become like an apocalypse? Will we have to like work 24 hours a day to keep up with the AI? Will the AI become our pets? Or the more optimistic viewpoint, will the AI like do enough of the work for us that we can just get back to the fun, right? Listening to music or doing the art or like kind of being just regular humans and kind of doing what the AI can't do. I mean, hopefully it heads in that direction, right? Where we have the tools such as Flowsend to make things easier for us to get it to the right people and to grow our businesses. And that's what we hope that it will lead to. And so as far as people getting to that point, right, and using the tool and having it grow their business and decreasing the time they have to put in, what is the final sales pitch for flowsend.ai. People like the value you gave on this podcast. They say, man, this guy Michael, like, he's got my attention. I want to go and sign up for an account and use it. Why should people use Flowsend right now instead of waiting?
They shouldn't if it's not. No, I'm just kidding. I really think your voice needs to be heard out there. People fear loneliness more than anything. If I'm just going to put it almost bleakly, but it's actually a very optimistic message in my opinion. You just mentioned, can we do more stuff ourselves? People want to hear from other people. That's the reality. They want to hear other people's stories. They want to hear other people's opinions. They want to hear other authentic opinions. We are focused on recorded content for a specific reason. People say, can I just put someone else's blog into Flowsend and repurpose that? No. Candidly, I don't care about that. Like, I care about unique perspectives, and that's where, where those are usually housed. And so you need to be sharing that content today, but needing to understand that, can we help you perfect that? Can we help you get to a really good place in terms of quality of stuff you're putting out there, consistency you're putting out there, and really customizing AI to what you need to be a thought partner, as opposed to your point, a pet or someone who's guiding the way that you talk, not having to figure out, without any payoff. And of course, you go ahead. And of course, just as a side note, we are always looking to understand different kinds of project types that people are doing in Flowsend. We're astounded sometimes by someone just randomly purchasing a license and putting in crazy types of content in there. If you want, inspiration on how it could work well for you, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to have a session with you and talk about how we can kind of orient it to what you need.
What I'm getting from that is that, so perhaps someone out there needs to increase their self-esteem a little bit and say, hey, there's all these great blog posts, but like, how about something new and unique from you? You have good stuff to say. And then also they need to maybe apply some pressure in order to like turn on their learning mode a little bit and get to using Flowsend. That way it becomes just like kind of built into their daily life. And then also that there is for sure a time for the chaos and the fun and experimentation, but how about actually getting it towards a purpose, right? You could put crazy stuff into Flowsend, but like, how about something that builds your brand, that shows the case studies and the stories and the psychological copywriting points, put it to good use, right? And that way, if you get some results from it, it'll become a feedback loop, and it won't just be something you play around, experiment with once and put to the wayside. It'll become an essential integrated tool that is called flowsend.ai, where you can transform any recording into content that drives growth. And so as people are going to flowsend.ai, Michael, at the very end of these podcasts, I like to kind of stump my guest a little bit. At the very, very end, ask for a fun quote or lesson that has served them in life that they can pass on to others. It can be original, it can be something you learned, but you mentioned about the authentic conversations and the unique humanity. What comes to mind for you as far as a fun quote or lesson that has helped you in personal or business that you can pass on to us?
Yeah, I think something I've been thinking a lot about recently is like what we should be proud of to release or not. And, I've been talking a lot about how everyone should be a thought leader, right? And everyone does have unique thought leadership from their experiences. I think creating is human, but I would never release something that I wouldn't be proud of to use myself. It's something I've been thinking a lot about recently in terms of not needing to be perfect, not needing to have always be a finished product, but to think deeply about, are we proud of what we're putting out there into the world? And, that drives me personally when I think about creating new things of like, would I use this or am I just doing this for pure mercenary gain? Right. And I think the world would be a really good place if we all had that kind of like level of artistry. I'm not saying I'm delivering on it at all times, but it's something that's really kind of driving me right now from a principles perspective.
I like it. Are you proud of this new feature? Is it useful? Is it something that you would put to a purpose? And so in order for you to put your content into a purpose, to repurpose, to meet people where they're at, go to flowsend.ai, flowsend.ai. Mr. Michael Katz, who empowers creators, businesses, and marketers to maximize content ROI and growth. He's the CEO of flowsend.ai. Go there right now. We'll see you there. And thank you very much, Michael, for an action-packed conversation. I feel like we packed in like 4, maybe 4.5 episodes in one. Really appreciate it. Thanks for stopping by.
Of course. Thank you.